just thank you so much again for jumping on. I feel like, the last time we talked, it was for AP. And I feel like we got to touch on a lot of stuff. Like we started touching on music and everything like that. And we didn't really have we had time to talk about music and shoot the shit about it. But I feel like, with this being, the EMOlition Derby podcast, I know you're a big fan of emo music, hardcore, punk, all that shit. And I think it's really cool to kind of get your perspective on that, as well as stuff from your career as well. But, with this conversation, I like to kind of start a little bit from the past a little bit. And obviously, I think the last time we talked, I believe I've seen that you are from Federal Way, Washington.
Yeah,
which is
so I was born in Federal Way, raised around the Seattle area, and then when I was 11, I moved to Northern California.
Dude, that's really crazy. So I grew up in Seattle. Yeah, so I grew up right on the bottom of Capitol Hill area, Madison Park. But I'm kind of thinking Federal Way is such an interesting area because you kind of get the mix of that Seattle life, but then you can also go to Tacoma as well too, and you're getting those two very different kind of cultural points there. And I'm kind of curious, obviously this is a music centric podcast, so I'm when you were growing up, were there any early music influences that really kind of stuck out to you living in that area, in that region? Because it does have such a vibrant history.
Yeah, it's
obviously
funny.
You're a little young.
It's funny. In the meta sense, I'm at an age now where I'm 32, and I'm looking at it's funny because things come in cycles, and you kind of get to a place at this age where you realize oh man, the old dudes were right. What was cool has always been cool. You know what I mean? And I've been fortunate enough to have a wide influence of music, my dad was there's so many examples, but I'll try to keep it the story short. My dad was Bob Marley and other reggae, more obscure reggae, stuff, and Hot Boys era, Cash Money Records, doing donuts in the seeing Juvenile do donuts in the Ferrari and shit, so my dad was listening to a bunch of hip hop, a bunch of West Coast gangster shit, and Snoop, Dre, all the West Coast gangster shit, and then all the Hot Boys and Cash Money Records Southern shit. And then he listened to a bunch of Bob Marley and other reggae artists. And my mom was it was all 90s R&B, Boyz II Men and Prince and that, and then weirdly enough, some Tim McGraw, old 90s country in a weird ways. My mom was from the Seattle area, but she would spend summers as a kid in Montana on her grandpa's farm. So it was weird. I was a city kid, but then my mom would randomly be watching bull riding or something on a Friday. If PBR was on, she would watch bull riding. It's a weird thing. My mom had a weird little bit of country in her. So my mom was all this 90s hip hop and R&B with a little bit of country, and my dad was gangster ass 90s hip hop with a lot of reggae influence, and that definitely influenced what I listened to for the last 2.5 decades. I found punk when I was probably 9 or 10 years old, and I got a pair of Vans, and the Warped Tour sampler came with the shoes. And I remember putting the CD into my little disc player and just being what the fuck is this? But just being I remember the exact feeling of not knowing what the fuck was going on, but knowing that I really enjoyed it. It was so different from, I loved music from an early age. I loved the music my parents listened to, but it was just so different. It wasn't country, and it wasn't rap, and it wasn't reggae, and it wasn't R&B. It was this other thing. And it was just I had no idea what the fuck was going on. I feel I had discovered this little secret thing that no one else knew about, Obviously they did, because it was a pair of Vans I bought at the mall, as a sampler that thousands of other kids got that same sampler. But to me, it was holy shit, dude. No one else has ever known about this thing. So all of those things, I think, just extended into my life. You know, there have been times in my life where I've listened to, like, my early teen years, it was just all hip hop, like all the hyphy movement stuff, like all the Northern California, like Bay Area, like party hip hop, all the hyphy shit was like, that was like my heart and soul through early high school. And then by late high school, even though I had liked a lot of heavier rock and I had listened to rock, grown up with bands like grunge bands, like growing up with Nirvana, growing up with a lot of the alternative in the 90s stuff that I loved. I loved Korn as a kid, all the rock that I loved. I wasn't listening to a lot of rock. And then in my late teens, I started getting more into like hardcore and metalcore. And so it's weird because when I was going through it, there was these big fluctuations, right? If you ask me from one year to the next, like, oh, I'm listening to something completely different than I was last year. But when you zoom out, you're like, man, it's all kind of the same shit that I thought was cool when I was 8 years old, 10 years old, you know?
Exactly, dude. And I love that you bring up like that very diverse spread of music, because like I'm looking at, like, it says you were born in 1990. I was born in 94. So we're about 4 years apart.
Yeah.
And I remember my high school years, it was like a mix between like punk and hardcore, but then you were listening to like Andre Nicotina. Growing up in that region, like NorCal, the PNW, it's all very, you know, there's similar areas. And I feel like that was kind of the vibe, like during those, like, I don't know, like late 2000s, mid 2000s era, or like, I guess like, because like that, and that's really interesting. And I kind of going back to the Warped Tour sampler, because I think that's such a pivotal thing to talk about, because like you could buy it in a mall, but it still was counterculture. And I'm kind of curious, like, you know, like I totally have the same experience, like the Warped Tour sampler, or like the Atticus Dragging the Lake compilation CD, which you could also get at like Zoomies or whatever when you were like, you know, 10. And I'm curious, like, what were some of those like first bands that you heard on that sampler that kind of blew your mind, that you're like, holy shit? Like, because I'm imagining it's probably like the first time you probably heard like screaming in that sense.
Yeah. So, man, to be honest, like I remember hearing that. And even at that time, it was like, I'm trying to remember the exact, I think it was almost all like pop punk, and there was almost no screaming on it, but it was still so different. Like, you know, and it was like, I think there was like weird ska stuff on there. I don't even remember the exact songs that were on it, but it was basically like Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2 soundtrack, but dangerous. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, but no one had heard it, but it was like, oh shit. Like, I'm going to tell everybody to fuck off when I hear this. Next time my mom tells me to do something, everybody's getting told to fuck off. Like, dude, you felt dangerous. But I remember the first inclinations of music, like, because the 90s hip hop shit that I loved was like that. But my parents had me so young that like they were kids too. And so like when Tupac or Dr. Dre or Snoop Dogg was on, it was tough and it was cool, but it was like my mom and dad were rapping along and was singing along to it. So, you know, to some degree it was still like normal, right? Whereas this shit was like, no, like it was weird and different. And like, and I remember even that feeling like, it's funny because certain bands are cool when you're 11 and then they're not cool for a long time. And then they get like retconned back into being cool. Like, a band like Linkin Park, for example. Like when Hybrid Theory came out, I was 10 years old. And I remember I just moved, I was 11, 10 and a half, 11. And I just moved to California and Hybrid Theory came out and I thought it was the fucking hardest thing I'd ever heard. And it was just so badass. Like it made me just want to put my fucking head through a wall. And then you spend like 15 years when you're listening to fucking whatever, like you're listening to fucking Terror. You know what I mean? Like when you're 17 and you're like, your friend's showing you like, you know, whatever band, when I'm listening to fucking, you know, Expire or Have Heart or something, like you can never admit that, like, you're like, Linkin Park's pretty sick. You can never admit that as like a high school senior, but as a sixth grader, it was the shit. And then as a high school senior, you can't admit that that's like actually pretty good fucking music. And then now I'm 30. I'm like, oh, actually like that first Linkin Park album was like dope, was something special. You know, it's like these things just come it's these revolutions, these like it all happens in cycles, man, and you get back to a place basically where you started.
Dude, you bring up such a good point there. Like, because I think a lot of people ignore that there was a period of time of like you like said you were a Linkin Park fan. You were kind of lame. Like you were considered lame.
Fuck, dude.
Yeah. It's like it was on the radio and people were like, oh, that's just like new metal shit. But now people are like, but new metal's tight.
Like, new metal's tight. Yeah. Well, this is the thing is actually, do you know Finn McKenty?
Of course. Yeah.
He's the man. Shout out to Finn McKenty. That's the homie. But he had a good point where it's basically like we're the gatekeepers now, right? Like as much as people try to be against gatekeeping, it's like now our generation of people is deciding what's cool. And so it's like, fuck, now all of a sudden Limp Bizkit has been retconned into being like a legit fucking tough metal band that like kids are like TikTok era kids are like think that Limp Bizkit's like a cool retro band. It's like, dude, people fucking hated Limp Bizkit.
They were so hated.
Dude, they were hated when they came out, and then after a certain point, the only kids listen to if you told people like when I was going to punk shows in my late teens, and I got to it late, like there was a bunch of kids who were really into punk, in their early teens, and I remember thinking it was cool, and I was friends with a lot of them, but I was really, I was a hip hop kid mostly, and then I started getting really into punk, and it was like the only kids who admitted that Linkin Park was cool or admitted that like Limp Bizkit was cool was like kids who like wore like had roller backpacks and like wore running shoes with their jeans and ran to class, like those kids who would just like, and then those kids would like start Breaking Bad, like they'd start rebelling and like acting tough and like, but they didn't quite know how to do it. Like they weren't actual punk kids or they weren't actually like hard kids. They were just like kind of like they like. I know, they started wearing like fedoras and shit. Like, the exact kids I'm talking about. Like that was like as tough as they got. Like they started wearing fedoras. So they were like, people knew they were like a bad boy now. But those were the only kids that were down to be like, oh yeah, Linkin Park, they're sick. Like if you were in a group of kids who actually like went to punk shows and like got in fights and like fucking got drunk and partied and like went to house shows and shit. Like if you told those kids that you listened to Linkin Park, they would fucking laugh at you at that point in time. But just a few years ago, Limp Bizkit, Linkin Park, Korn, those are all bands that were like the reason you even started listening to punk, And now at this age, it's like you're old enough to be like, God, no one's going to make fun of me. Or if they do, I don't care. Like all that shit's cool. Like, dude, new metal is fucking rad.
I love that you bring that up too and what Finn said about like that we're the gatekeepers now, because and I've heard him talk about that a lot. And it's something that I would talk about a lot with my peers at AP and everything like that. And just within the industry it's interesting because now we're of that age where we can be those tastemakers. Like, I mean, I could work at a publication like Alternative Press and start to give flowers to certain bands that deserved it. And that maybe the larger mainstream music, scene kind of overlooked for several years. And I think it's very, it's funny because or it's not funny, but I think a lot of it has to do with too, is like that music got really big. Like if you want to say new metal into like screamo into emo got really big in like a post 9/11 world. This is like a big reach, but I've brought this up before. Times were really crazy, society wise during that time. And we're seeing that resurgence happen now, like post COVID, like that was a crazy, global event as well too. And I think people are naturally gravitating towards aggressive music and kind of are looking back now and saying, why did we ever think we needed to like steer away from that, And it's interesting.
It is. That's an interesting point. I also think that's a really good point, actually. I think a lot of it too is that like even when people are they're like, people look at certain heavy music like it's God's gift and it's art, and then people look at other heavy music and go like, oh no, that's just like that's anyone can do that, like and I think that these things we're talking about have finally reached a place where our generation, like we said, are tastemakers, gatekeepers, whatever, and you can kind of just accept that all of it's pretty good. It's just that we were being snarky cunts at different points in our life. You know what I mean? I watch kids go from like, I love Linkin Park to Linkin Park is poser shit. I listen to post-hardcore and metalcore, and then metalcore and post-hardcore is poser shit, and all I listen to is black metal. And now those black metal kids have got like, now they've got like 2 children and a job, and they're like, whatever, all this shit's cool. Like I listen to the radio. I listen to podcasts on the way to work. Like that's all cool. It's all fine. Like whatever. I'll show my kids all of it. Like I literally watched kids go from like kids that I knew that were into heavy music for a 20-year period, almost 15-year period. And they like the thing that they love here in 2 years down the road is poser shit. Cause now they found something harder. And eventually you get as hard as you're going to listen to, you get to like some obscure black metal band that fucking only records on a fucking tape recorder. And that's what you listen to. And everybody else is a poser because they don't know about this band. And then you age out of that and you kind of are just able to go, it's all cool. It's all rad. Like, you know, you get to a place where you can see a big enough piece of the picture to be like, it's all fucking cool. Limp Bizkit with yelling about their dick and breaking stuff is cool. Deftones on the other end of the spectrum, that's like deep and mysterious and whatever is cool. All of it's fucking cool. You know what I mean? Like it's all cool. If it's heavy, it's fucking cool. Even if it's not, that's another step too, is you get to a place where you're like, I'm totally okay with listening to music that has no breakdown of any kind. You know what I mean? That's like a big step. Like that's a big step. Like there was years in my life where I was like bored with music if there was no like aggression in it. And now I'm at a place where I'm like, dude, it's cool. It doesn't have to, no one has to yell. No one has to be pissed off in this one song. It's all right.
It can literally be everything. Though I will confess, I did have my black metal phase where I had like the Dark Throne t-shirt, and I looked back on that time and I thought I was like, I totally felt like that elitist. And but it's funny though, we say like nobody's like that snarky character anymore. But I do recall a time recently where I was talking to somebody. It was like just a very just like random encounter. And I was like talking like, like I write about a lot of heavy bands, a lot of punk bands, rock bands. So like, oh yeah, like I like metal. And it was like this younger kid. And I was like, oh yeah, like what do you listen to? And he was like, Audio Slave and Linkin Park. And of course in my brain I still am snarky like in my brain like sure. So it's like I still can't completely get away from that, but like
for sure.
Like it's funny, but like kind of segueing, like you moved to Sacramento, and that also has like a really rich music scene as well too, like from so much stuff, like whether it obviously great hip hop came out of that area, but then you also had like really cool, like more like scene metalcore bands like Dance Gavin Dance come out of there. But then you had like those math rock bands like Terra Malos and like
Hella.
a lot like Birds. Like, dude, just so much dope shit.
You have Hella, you have Death Grips, you have a lot of really cool, weird shit from here. Deftones, you got, so many.
Are you still Sac based?
Yeah, in Sac.
Dude, that's sick, dude.
I bought a house in Sac. There's another band, Killing the Dreams, from here. Like, there's a lot of really fucking rad bands from here, man. A lot of really rad bands. Hoods is from here. There's a lot of
dude,
shit.
Yes.
Shout out Mikey Hood. Mikey Hood's a fucking maniac. We're still boys, we had a cool little Sacramento's got a cool fucking music culture, man. You got to dig a little deeper to find it, but it's pretty fucking rad.
I think Sacramento is like one of the coolest cities and one of the most underrated cities in California.
Agreed. I used to want to tell people how underrated Sacramento is. And now that I own a house here and I like really, this is like home, I'm totally okay with it being underrated. Like, don't move here. Stay in the Bay Area. It's fine.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't move up here. It's completely, it's under, you'll hate it. Don't come up here. It's pretty clean. Like, actually, it's getting really bad now with the homeless stuff and drugs. But I mean, it's been that way for a while. But there's definitely downside to Sacramento. There's tough parts. There's a lot of gun violence in certain areas. But comparatively, there's a lot of good things about it. So people in the Bay Area, people in Southern California, stay there. You'll hate it here.
Yeah, dude. I mean, it doesn't have that like kind of annoying like tech bro vibe that like, San Francisco has. And like, dude, like, I don't know if you've been back to Seattle much recently, but it's like, it's kind of like all tech bros or like the most like terrible homelessness. Like there's no like real in between anymore
it's
there.
Like infinite growth next to complete poverty. Yeah.
Dude. It's so, I mean, I guess I live in LA and it's like the same as that too.
I mean, it's kind of every major city is kind of this weird dystopian, like fucking shantytown outside of like $1 billion corporation headquarters. It's a weird place. Sacramento's homeless population's gotten pretty rough. We have a lot of gang violence in certain areas too, where we have things that are less than ideal in Sacramento, but we also have a lot of really good people and tight knit communities, and I love it here, man. Yeah, I love it here. I went to Seattle recently too, and I loved it, but I definitely could see that what you're talking about. It's like it seems kind of. It's hard not to feel like the world's ending. Every generation feels like the world's ending, but it's hard not to. You look around, it's like hard not to fucking see the death throes of an empire. You know, it's like the fucking. It's like I always think like when the Roman Empire was like at the beginning of the end. Like I wonder if people knew it was the beginning of the end, or if they were just like, "Wow, it's still better than everywhere else. It'll be fine."
I think they had to have instinctually known.
Like, I mean, do you instinctually know? Like we kind of instinctually know.
Yeah,
It's over. It feels almost over. Like it feels like not like we'll be fine. By the time we die, things will still be pretty good. But like, it's like it's getting tough. It's getting tough.
Our grandkids, they might not be
a bad time. Our grandkids are in for a weird bad time for sure.
Yeah, it's like we never know, but you know, like
I also think you talked about that too. I also think, I mean, you touched on that. It's like maybe that's why you have more of these pissed off kids making and being attracted to this heavy music. It's like, you know, you see. I mean, what's the reason punk started in the first place? You know, and then what's the reason that hardcore was birthed from that? And what's the reason that every offshoot of everything we're talking about is? It's like you have these kids who fucking are kind of coming to the realization that like this American dream that they've been sold might not be what it's either it's there and they won't get a piece of it, or when they work their ass off to get a piece of it, it won't be like what you told them it was going to be. And I think a lot of kids see that and are pretty fucking pissed off about it. And I think that's why you see so many kids that fall in love with heavy music. And I think that's why heavy music's so important, you know, and when I say heavy music, I mean, I don't even just mean punk and hardcore. I mean hip hop. I mean, dude, there's even country that I listen to. Like there's some like new school outlaw country dudes, and you listen to their songs and it's like, dude, if you took just subject matter, like if you just took the subject matter, it could be a hip hop song. It could be any kind of song. It happens to be a country song, but it's, you know, subject matter alone. It's a universal thing. You know, that's why music is so fucking important.
Exactly. I think that like that punk spirit is more of just like a code of ethics, if anything. It doesn't have to be like this genre thing. And I like that point you bring up too, like, you know, like thinking that, okay, maybe like, you know, it's kind of the end times right now at the moment. But, you know, I wonder, you know, in the 70s and 80s, there was horrible shit going on. There was horrible shit in the 40s. We just didn't have social media at the time. Right. So, you know, at the same time, like, you know, it all could be more magnified, you know, obvious. I mean, it is more magnified because of social media and everything like that. But, you know, with that, you know, more people, are getting to express themselves musically. Like you can be a rapper, do something over a song and blow up overnight because it's just like,
in your bedroom on your phone.
Yeah. It's incredible.
It's incredible. Like you see these kids who are like, I recorded 4 or 5 songs on my phone. And they got 10 million views on fucking SoundCloud and over the weekend, and like now they're a dude that you see on Spotify playlists. You know, it's like it's a cool thing. Like before, like I remember hip hop in high school. If someone was like, I remember Lupe Fiasco not signing, with Jay-Z or Kanye was a crazy statement to make. You know what I mean? Like. Mm-hmm. To be wanted by a major label and not sign was like a fucking crazy move to make. And then I remember like getting into independent rappers and like they'd be just on like Rap-A-Lot Records with their own like sub label, and like seeing like that was like as a renegade as it could get, man. It was like, oh, this guy's like independent because has his own sub label and does his own thing. And now you have kids who just like getting a record deal isn't even like a part of the thing. It's not even like in their frame of reference. Like they're like, all right, I'm going to make a hit song. I'm going to get it posted to thousands of reels on Instagram. I'm going to sell a bunch of merch. I'm going to go on tour. Like getting a record label isn't even like a part of it's not even on their checklist anymore. And it's really cool to see, because that's such a crucial part of that punk that punk code of ethics that you talked about, like that DIY spirit of like, we're going to do it ourselves. Almost anyone can do that now. Before that was like this crazy cross to bear. If you were a punk band that did everything independently, or if you were a hip hop artist that did everything independently, that was like a merit badge almost. It was like, man, he's taking the hard way, whereas now kids have made it work for themselves. And it's like a lot of these dudes are making more money without a deal, like having better careers without a deal.
100%. And, kind of segueing, like talking about that punk spirit and that DIY mentality, like that had to have been super, I would imagine, like you applied that so much to your early career and how you got into MMA fighting and everything like that. Because, I'm wondering if there are like a lot of parallels. I'm sure there are between being like a mixed martial artist, grinding to get to UFC, the same way that like a punk or hardcore band is absolutely throwing everything at it. Maybe experiencing a lot of failure at the beginning and a lot of like setbacks, times of like where there isn't a lot of money coming in, and then you have to just keep building and everything like that. Would you say there are like parallels like that, like in those early years?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of, not even just in the early years, even being in the UFC, I think there's a lot of parallels. Like, I have so many friends who, are professional musicians and in successful bands, and we talk about, what it takes to get there, what it takes to stay there. Sometimes staying there at the top is harder than, staying in that top 1% of guys who are actually making a living doing what they love. Like sometimes it's like, it's as hard as it is to get there, it's even harder to maintain that for any amount of time, and excuse me, it's interesting. Like, I think there's parallels that you can draw from music to fighting, but I think there's parallels you can draw from fighting to so many other things like that. So many other careers where there's no guarantee of success, It's like, and so much about fighting and music and these other trades or crafts that you have to perfect and work on for decades to even have a chance at making it. The crazy thing about them is like they're performance based. Like, yes, you have to be good, but more than that, like you have to be unique. You have to be original. You have to bring something to the table. Like, it's not just enough to win fights to get in the UFC. You got to win fights, and you got to like do it. You got to do it a certain way and have a certain thing about you, and like get in front of the right people and have a little bit of dumb luck and have maybe somebody looking out for you. It's like there's 1,000 factors. Like, it's not what you do, it's how you do it and where you do it and who saw you do it. And there's so many factors. I talk to guys in music. I talk to a lot of the pro surfer guys. It's the same everywhere, man. When you pursue something like this that you love, you have to go all in and you have to bet on yourself, and you have to understand that like it might not look the way you pictured in your head. You might go years without getting the recognition that you think you deserve. You might get half of what you want and realize halfway through that you don't want the rest of it. You might put in all the work, and someone who's you don't think half as good as you gets the reward. Like there's all these speed bumps you face along the way, but the reoccurring theme is you have to just keep doubling down and betting on yourself, and you have to stay in love with the thing that you do. And I feel like whatever the speed bump throws at you, a fucking emergency eye surgery or, or a decision win that you should have had, but it ended up being a decision loss, or the times where you're starting out and I've had to steal groceries and get gas money from digging up the fucking quarters in my ashtray, like as long as no matter what the situation is and no matter what the thing that you love doing, no matter what it throws at you, as long as you keep betting on yourself and you keep that belief, and you take the actions to keep getting closer to the goal you set, like that's the only thing that matters. And I think that's a universal thing, whether it's fighting or music or surfing or any of these things that are real, I don't know, expressions. They're real like labors of love. You can't do this shit unless you really fucking love it. And it's not going to be for everyone. It's not going to be for most people. But if you're one of those people that really feels compelled to like chase that dream, then you got to bet on yourself every step of the way.
Dude, that's a really beautiful way to
My
put
dog
it.
agrees in the background.
Yeah. Well,
He's
dude, even more so than just labor of love. I mean, it just seems like it takes so much personal sacrifice, to do
you have to
what
be
you're
ready to
doing.
give up almost everything.
Yeah. And
Not almost, you have to be ready to give up everything.
I think it's really interesting that you bring up that, like, there's no guarantee of success, and like, boom, like right there, that's a parallel between music, because like you could write the greatest song today and that is not enough. You know what I'm saying? Like that is not enough anymore.
How many bands do you know that like 30 years after they're gone, people are like, man, they were so ahead of their time. It's like they didn't
American
get any
football, dude. I
yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
like, think about that. Like, no one cared when that band first came out at all. Like they faded into obscurity. And so, like 20 years later, like it's crazy. Yeah, dude. I mean, I remember the last time we talked too. Yeah. I mean, like there's like so much talk about like longevity, and sustainability within your career field and everything like that. So I never admittedly kept too much with like the wrestling world, but I kind of started to notice more about it because of like a lot of hardcore bands are sort of affiliated with that.
There's a weird crossover.
There's a crossover now. And like, so I've interviewed, I don't know if you know Brody King. He's like a big AEW wrestler. And
he has the big Mahakala tattoo on his chest, huh?
Yeah. Yeah. And he's,
I have the same tattoo. It was the same thing on my back. So I saw him and was like, oh, that guy's fucking all right.
He's dope, dude. He plays in a band called God's Hate, and they're really cool and really sick hardcore band. And I started to kind of see like there is starting to be this crossover now in that world where it's like you see guys like Malachi Black, like the songs they come out to are like old like Madball songs and shit like that. It's like so interesting. And I'm kind of curious if like you have sort of, because I'm unfamiliar if UFC has done this, but like, have you wanted to see more of a crossover between those worlds? And like, have you ever wanted to try to facilitate like crossing over those worlds more? Because I know you've mentioned like your homies with like Code Orange and stuff like that. And that's funny. My girlfriend is actually their day-to-day manager for Code Orange.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So she works for Rock Nation, their new management company. So, I mean, just seeing that, it's like,
that's awesome, man.
I feel like there needs to be so much more crossover between those worlds, because I feel like,
I mean, it's not just me. There's a lot of guys. Khalil Roundtree, great UFC fighter, also very into hardcore in the scene and has a lot of friends in the scene. There's others that I'm not thinking of, but there's a lot of guys that are fans of hardcore. I think not a lot, but there's a handful of guys. But yeah, I think there's actually a very, I don't know about, I think at the higher levels, there's guys doing pro wrestling. Like there's more notoriety amongst the guys doing pro wrestling that are also into punk and hardcore. I think that the average like hardcore kid does do jujitsu or Muay Thai, like it's a pretty common thing, but I haven't seen a lot of high level guys who are like doing it for a living yet. But I think that that's changing. I do think pretty soon we're going to see a big crossover the way that there has been in pro wrestling. I think these kids who are like 16, 17 years old and like doing Muay Thai and doing jiu-jitsu and really into hardcore, I think, those will be the kids you see in the UFC in 10 years. So as of right now, it's just me and Khalil and maybe a couple others holding it down. But I do think that those kids are on the way. And the next generation is a fucking scary thing, man. That progression of fighter right now is crazy. Like people don't realize how new the MMA is.
Mm-hmm.
Like you look at pro football.
Mm-hmm.
It's like it is what it's basically what it's gonna be. Like athletes are getting bigger and better and faster for sure, but two things work: like they run the ball or they throw the ball. Like every once in a while, there's some trick play, but you figured out exactly what works. Like people run the ball or throw the ball because the sport's been around long enough to figure out what works and what doesn't. MMA is getting to that place, but it's still so new that, dude, you can watch a UFC fight and go, "Oh shit, I've never seen that." Like there's very few times you watch an NFL game or NBA game and people watching who are lifelong fans go, "Oh shit, I've never seen that." Like it almost never happens. MMA is so new that you can still watch MMA and be like, "Oh fuck, like I've never seen anyone do that." Like I've never seen anyone move that way or use this technique or do something that everybody thought wouldn't work but does work at a high level. And so you see the game of MMA evolving. You see the young guys getting better and better and better, younger and younger, and the next generation. Like the sport is evolving so fast, you can see it in real time, man. And like, it's an crazy thing. The next generation of kids are scary. There's a kid that trains with us. Started training with us full time at like 15. Like he started getting in the gym at 15. Decided all he wanted to do was train. So he stopped going to regular school and started homeschooling. And then he was in the gym 6 hours a day. Now he's 17 and he's competing against adult UFC fighters. Like,
holy shit,
in the gym. Like he's 17 years old. He's still in high school, still wrestling and like winning high school tournaments. But he's like going to these high school tournaments and beating people up because he's like, man, they're just kids. Like it's like, like he literally trains. He's literally 17 years old, hasn't even made it all the way through puberty yet. He's literally fighting UFC fighters every day. So when he goes and wrestles other kids, he's like, oh, they're just kids. Like it's like not even fair anymore. Like
it's like an appetizer.
Yeah, he's a monster, dude. He's an absolute monster. And he's only 17. He can't even legally fucking vote yet. He can't buy a pack of cigarettes. He's like training at the highest level 6 hours a day. Like by the time he's my age, it's like won't even be the same fucking sport, dude.
Dude, that's so wild because like, I mean, admittedly, I did not know too much about UFC until even really I interviewed you. Like admittedly, I wasn't following the sport as much. And I think that's really, really interesting that like you're bringing up this next generation. So you're kind of saying like, you didn't really necessarily like have those reference points. Like like now kids are looking up to you and being like, I want to fight like Andre Fili. Like I want like, or whoever your contemporaries are, and yeah, they absolutely are. And like, like, so you didn't necessarily have that. Like when you were coming into it, like you didn't have like maybe a little bit, but not to the extent that these kids have it now. So I'm curious, like, who did you sort of like, what were sort of like your fighting influences? Like, who were you looking up to? Like, I think I see like Muhammad Ali in the background. Is that?
Yeah. Ali. So that's Muhammad Ali. And then there's a guy, he actually lives in Sac. I think he's from the Pacific Northwest, but he lives in Sac. He's an artist named Indian Giver. And he takes these like, so that's Ali, a picture of Ali shot by Andy Warhol. And then he draws a bunch of like American traditional flash on the picture.
Oh, sick.
So it's like an Andy Warhol picture of Ali that Indian Giver drew a bunch of cool stuff on. So yeah, shout out to Indian Giver.
Hell yeah.
My house is fucking filled with art. That's the other one is Pony Girl. She's like a really badass photographer. She's from the Pacific Northwest too. So shout out to her.
Hell yeah.
But yeah, so as far as the influence, it's funny because I had guys that I looked up to, it's probably just like music, right? It's like the only reason you get punk now is because of like if you didn't like the punk we listen like if your favorite hardcore band now probably wouldn't be here if it wasn't for fucking Minor Threat, right?
Or the Crow.
Then you look at Minor Threat, but like who did Minor Threat look to? Like they looked to someone that was like whatever the hardest thing that they could find. You know what I mean? Like Minor Threat, as original as they are, they didn't invent that stuff, right? They took it and made it their own. It's the same with me. Like I grew up watching guys like Uriah Faber. I loved watching Uriah Faber. I loved watching Nick Diaz. I loved watching BJ Penn, Eve Edwards. These were the guys but they were the most advanced guys in the world at that point. Some of those guys could still hang today, but you look at what they were doing then, and it's not the same as what guys are doing now, right? It's a less complete game. Back in the day, it was like, a typical fighter story would be like a high school wrestler turned college wrestler who after college wanted to compete and found MMA and then learned to box and do jiu-jitsu and do Muay Thai, right? That's like a typical story. And then when I started watching the UFC, like there was guys like Rich Franklin became the UFC middleweight champion after being like a math teacher. Like he was like a math teacher into his 20s, and then in his late 20s started doing jiu-jitsu, and then by like his early 30s was UFC champion in like 4 or 5 years, right? Now to be the middleweight champion, you're talking about fucking like Kamaru Usman. You know what I'm saying? You're talking about a guy who's been a fighter for a decade, and before that was a wrestler for 15 years. Like, so growing up, I would watch a guy who was a college wrestler and then a fighter and was working on his boxing and his jiu-jitsu, right? That's a typical story. Then my generation came along and was like, no, I've been doing wrestling, boxing, jiu-jitsu, and everything else since I was a young kid for the whole purpose of fighting. Like my singular focus is fighting. And my generation sort of took over from these guys who learned piece by piece. We learned everything all at once. And now this next generation is like my generation where they learned everything all at once, but they started instead of starting at 13 or 15, they started at 6 or 7.
Holy shit.
And they're freak athletes and their parents are actually facilitating it. So they're like homeschooled and all they do is train. You see what I'm saying? Like this evolution, it's like, how did we get to this heavy music? Like, well, each person was influenced by whatever the heaviest thing they could hear. Like for me, the most technical fighters, the most like innovative fighters I could find influenced me. And then the things I was doing was on the next level. And now the kids that are coming after me are fucking terrifying because they're getting to build off of everything. Like we're all standing on the shoulders of the last generation. So then the kids coming up now, it's like, you know, what the guys I was watching fight, their parents didn't even know what fighting was. Mm-hmm. Then my generation was like, most of our parents were like, what the fuck are you talking about? You can't fight for a living. And it was like, all right, watch, I'm going to bet. This generation is like, hey, I want to fight for a living. Their parents are like, well, let's drive you to jujitsu. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, this is the evolution of all these things. And it's fucking cool to see, man. It's really cool to see. And I'm really fortunate to be a part of something I love and been around long enough to see that the generations. I'm into this third generation of MMA and also be a part of it in some way, you know, like I'm entering the prime of my career. So I'm still at the forefront of the sport, but I can, they're breathing down my neck, man. They're on my heels. Like I can feel the next generation racing behind me, trying to catch me. And like, they're not far behind, man. And so to be able to maybe to sort of be that person that helps facilitate that and can help out in some way and help lead by example. And I try to be the person that I didn't have when I was that age, right? Like you got to be the person that you needed when you were 12 years old or 15 years old or 18 years old. Like, so I'm in a place now where I'm sort of like filling this position. Like I've gone from little brother to older brother, and now I kind of get to pay that forward, you know? And I had people like Uriah and Danny Castillo, who looked out for me. And now I get to look out for this next generation of kids. And, it's a responsibility that I love and I take it serious, and I'm thankful to be a part of it, man.
That's
so I know that was a long-winded rant, but I love this shit. I love fighting. I love it on a deep level. So
no, dude, that was beautifully said. That's fucking awesome, dude. And you know, I want to touch. I don't want to take up too much more of your time. I just have another, just 2 quick questions. I want to touch on Born Breach in a second. Your music as well. Yeah. But before we do, I'm curious, it just kind of popped in my mind. It's kind of a stupid question, but, you know, with the sport of like, you know, of mixed martial arts, everything that you're doing, you know, there is an art form to it. So I'm wondering, are you like a spin kicking guy? Like, can you fucking crowd kill like in a pit? Like, I'm just curious, like,
I actually don't mosh like too much because I'm always like, dude, imagine just getting a fucking broken nose and not being able to compete at an actual fight.
No, like not now. I mean, dude, I haven't been in a pit in like 10 years.
Yeah, but I definitely used to mosh a little bit. Even back then wasn't crazy. Like if it's a band or a song I really love, I'll get in the pit still. Like we just opened up for or we had a band open up for us the last Born Breach show, a pop punk band called Tarnish from Northern California. Young kids, they're fucking sick. They kind of sound like a young like Story So Far.
Cool.
Really, really cool. Shout out to those guys. And they were playing on our show, so they like make more pop punk, but they're like, all right, just for this show, we decided we're gonna cover we're gonna do a Knocked Loose cover. Hell yeah. And they fucking ripped, and everybody just went ape shit, and it was cool, man. I got busted in the mouth and shit. Had to do my set with a fucking fat lip and shit. But yeah, I actually don't. I mosh, but I actually am like super. Maybe it makes me like a poser, but I'm like super anti crowd killing.
No, dude, me too. I'm just curious. Like I was like,
Yeah,
I just
no. I'll get down a little bit in the pit, but I'm like anti crowd killing. Like we had like maybe 2 or 3 shows ago, we had this huge brawl breakout with this hardcore crew from Sacramento, and I'm actually friends with a lot of the guys, but it just cracked off. They were one of the dudes was like crowd killing and was a little too overzealous to punch people who didn't want to be punched, and he didn't take the hint. He got pushed away once, didn't take the hint, and my boy just pulled cross, boom, dropped him, just fucking dropped him, and it just cracked off, dude. And we just tore the place apart, and like, it was all cool after. Like, I know some of those guys, and they're cool. At calmer heads prevailed after we all got down a little bit, but I always have basically the same, because my friends get down. Like my friends we grew up a certain way. We all grew up fighting and shit, so. Anytime I play a show, I give the same speech. Like, look to your left and your right and just assume that that's a bad motherfucker, right? I'm sure you all think you're bad motherfuckers, but look to your left and your right and just assume that everyone here can fuck you up. So act accordingly. And if you want to mosh, we want you to tear this place apart, but like do it in the pit. If you crowd kill and you get socked, like that's on you, bro. Like that's on you. Like if I see you crowd killing, I'm going to fucking sock you in the head with this microphone. Yeah. And if someone beats your ass for crowd killing, like, because the other thing too is like, dude, like, I mean, most punk shows is fucking not the case. But when we play, like, there's girls there. There's like hot girls there that like are hanging out and like they don't want to get punched by you. Like they're gonna stand in the back. It's all ages show. There's people brought kids, dude. Their kids don't want to get kicked in the face by you. That's why they're in the back. If you want to be a man, get it. If you want to be not a man, but if you want to fucking mosh and be a fucking maniac, get in the fucking middle of the pit and do that. That's fine. But if you're gonna crowd kill, like, we're gonna beat your ass probably. Like if you're a dickhead, you're gonna get beat up at our show. Like if you're at a Born Breed show and you act like a fucking asshole, you're gonna get beat up. And like, to me, I'm not the expert on punk or anything, but like that's how it should be. Like,
I agree. Dude, I mean, I've been into punk and hardcore most of my life, and I'm the first one to admit I am the biggest poser. I'm literally the guy. I'm like the total LA guy at a show. I'm in the back. I'm in like the VIP area or whatever, drinking drinking a drink, arms crossed, and I probably look like I hate it, but I'm loving it. Like, dude, that is me. And it's like, I just asked that because I'm just thinking about it because like I'll interview like a guy like that Brody King guy, and I'm like. And he's like talking about hitting the pit. I'm like, Jesus Christ, that'd be the most terrifying fucking thing in the world. No.
And this is the thing. I actually, Finn McKenty and I talked about this when I did his podcast. There's lessons to be learned, man. And you learn this in a fight room, in a wrestling room. You learn this in places like that. But you also learn them at shows. You learn them in the punk community too. Like there's consequences. Like if you act like a fucking asshole, you get beat up. If there's a 300-pound dude in the pit swinging his arms, stay the fuck away from him. Yeah. If you I'm a normal sized guy, dude. I weigh 175 pounds. If a 300-pound dude who fucking all he does is like lift dudes and throw them around a ring, like he just lifts weights and beats dudes up, like, bro, get the fuck away from him. He's in the middle of the pit. That's his pit, bro. Have fun, bro. Like, this is the thing. Like, you learn these things. Like, these are lessons that you learn growing up in these scenes. And like, whether it's fighting or punk or even surfing, they hockey, anything, they police each other. There's a code of conduct, and it's important to learn these things, I think. But right now we live in a generation where dudes just say whatever and they think that words or actions don't have consequences. And like, that's not how the fuck I grew up, bro.
No, fuck no.
That's just not it, bro.
So switching gears, the last thing I want to bring up is obviously, Born Breach. So it sounds like you have been playing shows like pretty recently. It sounds like, I mean, you mentioned that show, like, and I'm curious, like the last time we talked, I remember you mentioning working with Will Yip. I don't know if it had just happened or it was going to happen. Sort of walk me through that a little bit.
Yeah. So I've been a big fan of basically everything Will's done. Like, Will is the fucking man.
Yep.
Shout out to Will Yip. He's like one of the nicest guys too. It's crazy. Like, it's an interesting thing when a guy can be at the top of his field and like, you meet these guys who are just total dickheads. Yeah. And then you meet a guy like Will, who is like, he's the guy for what he does. And he's still so cool and so kind and like, so helpful, you know? So yeah, we, Born Breach, we started writing some new music. We've been real slow on it. We're fucking trying to get it done, but we're recording some stuff now. And, you know, we're recording here in Sacramento, and then we're sending it to Will to have him work on it, you know, and just through talking with Will and kind of getting to know each other a little bit and just casual conversation, you know, I asked him if he'd work on the project for us, and he said, yeah. And it's cool. It's cool to, I think I'm not always like the most talented guy, and I'm not always the most naturally like immediately successful guy. But one thing about me is like, if I want something, I'll ask for it, or I'll go after it, or I'll like, I have a why not me mentality where it's like, why, if that guy can do it, I can fucking do it, you know? So, you know, it's still scary. Like I still had to preface, like I asked Will cause he's the guy, like I really wanted him to do it. So I asked him, even though I had no business asking him, and thankfully he said yes. And then I literally had to preface when I sent him the first thing we did for him to kind of work on. I had to preface like, hey dude, like I'm not a good vocalist. So if it sucks, I'm really sorry. Like, I'm really sorry. And then, you know, he's like, no, this sounds great. Like it's fucking awesome, blah, blah, blah. You know, and it's like, it worked out. It just worked out. But I think it just, that just came from us having a few conversations and just not being scared to ask for what you want, you know, like I'm nowhere near the level that Will is. So I'm so fortunate that he's willing to work with us. But the guys that I play with are incredible musicians. So it's just, what I'm trying to say is I'm super fortunate to be around people who are really good at music, even though I'm not great at music, and just always asking for what you really want, you know, like I wanted to be in a band with guys who are really good musicians, and thankfully I was able to find that. I wanted the project to be produced by someone like Will Yip, and I actually got Will Yip to be able to do it. It's like you hit what you aim at, you know? And so I'm just always trying to fucking punch out of my weight class, you know? I'm always trying to do things at a level, the highest level that I can possibly do them at. And thankfully somehow I tricked a few really good musicians into being in a band with me. And somehow I tricked Will Yip into producing we have a 6-song project coming out. And I'm really just thankful for all those guys. I'm thankful to be a part of Born Breach, and it's been an incredible experience. Yeah.
I personally, just from an outsider, don't think you tricked anything. I think it's really cool because, I mean, I think last time we spoke, you mentioned like Title Fight Shed being a big influence on you, and like that's a Will Yip record.
Yeah.
And it's like, look at a band like Title Fight. Like, I love Title Fight. Their singer's not like the greatest fucking singer in the world. Like, my favorite band of all time is Thursday. I love Jeff Rickley. He's the man. But he's not like the greatest singer in the world. He just has a lot of passion. And like, I feel like, who gives a shit? You know what I'm saying? Like,
I mean, the good news is I love punk. So like, the good news is I'm not out here making like R&B or something. I would be in trouble. But because I'm making punk, you can project that feeling.
And I'm curious, like, what's the sound kind of shaping up to be? Because I remember you also talking about how like you love like twinkly emo music as well too, but then you also love like new metal, you love hardcore, and like I think you mentioned your guitar player is like super into math rock and everything. Like that.
The drummer,
Oh, the drummer, yeah.
He's super influenced by like Terra Melos and Hella and all those bands you were naming, Sacramento bands. It's funny. It started out as almost a joke, but now we're just like, yeah, fuck it. We're a new metal band, dude. Like, we're a rap rock band. Like, we're a new metal band, dude. Fuck that. Like, we're a bunch of 2000s kids. Like, we're fucking, that we're a new metal band, dude. So yeah, the stuff we're making right now is really hard, aggressive rap rock shit. And it's fun and it's jumpy and it's angry and it's going to be rad. And then the next project, we already have the next project sort of being mapped out, and some things, some riffs and some ideas. And it's a little more like melodic. It's a little more like, I don't want to say grown up, because whatever. It's like a cliche, but a little more grown up, but still fun, still jumpy, still heavy. But I think we're just kind of taking it as it comes, like whatever we feel like making, we make, like, but it's heavy and it's fun. And that's kind of what we're sticking with right now. I'm doing a solo project. I'm doing a solo hip hop project where I'm going to be basically like rapping over like Midwest emo beats and like punk beats. And like, yeah, we talked about it before, and it's like, most of the project is going to be like, I want it to be like Mac Miller meets Title Fight. And I'm not on the level of either one of those, but I think that they fit well together. And that's sort of my idea,
That's like, so dope, dude. You, like that hybrid right there. Like that's fucking awesome, dude. That's really exciting.
I'm excited. Hopefully I can do it some justice. I'm really excited. So right now that's musically what I'm focused on. Is Born Breach is the first first priority. We got 6 songs that we're going to drop as soon as possible. And they're going to be heavy and fucking gnarly and a lot of fun. And then I'm working on my sad boy hip hop shit, and that'll be fun too. So yeah, I'm excited, man.
Dude, that's so fucking awesome, man. So when can we expect like some like the first like Born Breach singles to come out from this new batch, do you think?
Soon. No, I don't know. The eye surgery set me back a little bit, but I'm writing and basically the guys are laying their tracks down now. So I'm hoping in the next couple of months we can really start pushing this out. Yeah.
Cool. And then, really just beyond that too, like obviously you're getting back to it in June. So, what's next, and just, what are you looking forward to?
Yeah, I'm going to be winning a fight in June. I don't know exactly yet, but I'm just going to take the rehab on my eye series, really, really, put a lot of intention to getting my eye back to 100%, and then get back in that cage and get another win, man. Just the excuse me, the plan stays the same, but little speed bump in the road, but the plan stays the same, and all the objectives are still the same, and the marathon continues,
Fuck yeah, dude. Well, man, that's all my questions. And I just appreciate you again so much for jumping on and dealing with all those like dumb technical difficulties. I apologize.
Not at all, bro. I appreciate you, man. Thanks for having me on. We got to do this more. I love talking to you.
Dude, say it likewise, dude. It's always a pleasure, dude. And yeah, man, just thank you again. And I'll make sure to thank Nikki as well, too. She's great. And
she's the best.
Dude, she's fucking awesome.
Yeah, hell yeah.
Hell yeah,
right,
dude.
Appreciate you,
man. We'll talk soon, dude.
Yes, sir. Later.
Peace, dude.